In this lecture, we're going to be talking about spline modeling. As we've worked before, working with polygonal modeling, we just worked with geometries. Now, we're just going to work with shapes, which is splines, which is 2D lines. Just going to maximize my viewport. I'm just going to create any of these shapes. For example, a rectangle, a circle, maybe a star, and let's say a text. These are 2D shapes, okay? I can just move them by the move tool. I can rotate them, and I can scale them, just like any other object in 3D Max. Now, if I select any of those objects, for example, the circle, I can just go to the Modify tab and modify its parameter. For example, this circle has a radius. I can make the radius bigger or smaller. I can select the square or the rectangle, and I can change the width and the height, or the length and the width, and I can change the corner radius, make it sharp corners or filleted or smooth. Same thing for the star. I can just select the star. It has different parameters. So I have the radius 1, the outer radius, and the inner radius. I can change the number of points. I can do a small distortion. I can do fillet from the outside, and I can fillet from the inside or make it smooth. Same thing for the text. I can access all the parameters of the text, the font, make it italic, underline, the alignment, left, right, or center, the size, the kerning, the leading, and the text. I can change the text. Great. And that's applicable for all the other shapes. Great. Now, if I select a circle or any other object, and I went to the modifier, the parameters is always different from one shape and another. It has different parameters. But the common part is the interpolation and rendering. So if I go to interpolation, I have something called steps. The more steps I have, the more smooth the curves are. And if I go down with the steps, it will be more jagged. So low res circle or smooth circle high res. So I can add steps or take away, depending on what I want. That's applicable on all the other objects. So if I go in here to the star, I can make it less steps or more steps. I can go to the text. Okay, I can go interpolation, less steps or more steps. As you can see, where I have a curve, it will get affected. If I go to the letter T, for example, and I go down and up, nothing will happen. Same thing for the X. If I go to the square or the rectangle in here, and I play around with the steps, nothing is going to happen because it is just a straight line. Now, the other thing, I'm just going to go add some steps. I can also activate the adaptive. Instead of putting the number in here, it will just put the approximate number that needed for this object to make it smooth. Okay, usually I don't like to work with that. I prefer to put my own number, but if you need it, it will be easier just not to waste time adjusting the steps. All you need to do is press adaptive and it will become smooth. Great. Now, the third option is rendering. If you go to rendering, by default, because we are working in 3D Max, which is a 3D software and has a 3D engine to render, if I go to rendering, I'm just going to do this for now. I'm just going to turn off GI because I don't have light, and we're going to go explain what does that mean later on. If I press rendering, render, it will render my view, but nothing will be seen. But I have a lot of things here. Because they are 2D, and this is a 3D engine, it should not be seen. Great. So now everything I'm doing here cannot be seen. Now, if I want the 2D objects to be seen in the render, all I need to do, I have to go to the rendering tab, and I have to go enable in renderer, enable in viewport. Now, as you can see, the object is no more 2D, it's a 3D, it has a thickness. Now, if I go and render this, you can see that this this circle is the only scene in this render because allow rendering. Great. Now, I always advise that you have both on or both off. Why? Because whatever I see in the viewport, I need to see it in the renderer. If I just check the viewport, I will see this 3D, but when I render, nothing will be seen. But at the same time, if I have the rendering on and the enable off, so I see that it's not seen In here it's not thick, but when I render, it will be render and visible. So that you don't get confused, just have them both on or both off. So whatever you see in the viewport, you have to see in the render. And this is applicable on all the other objects. So now if I enable render in a viewport in all of those, 3 for example, and I do a rendering, you can see that they are all visible except the text because I did do it. Great. Now, when I do enable and render enable viewport, I have 2 options. Either I want the thickness to be radial or rectangular. So now by default it's radial, so I can make it thicker or maybe thinner. Maybe I want it to be a thin line or a thick line. Okay, definitely I'm gonna press F4 to see my wireframe, and then you can add more sides or less sides to it, and you can play with the angle, make it rotate around itself. That's for radial. If I don't want radial thickness, I can go to rectangular thickness, and I'm gonna have the length and the width, and then I have the angle to play around with it. So I have something like that. Okay, so now I can just make this 2D object become 3D and renderable. So if I go render now, I can see the object in 3D. Great. Now, so I'm just going to delete some of those. I'm just going to stay up with the rectangle, or maybe just going to leave the circle. I'm just going to delete or remove the rendering. And now I want to adjust the square or the rectangle, the circle, or any other 2D object. I'm going to remove also the rendering in here to adjust and manipulate the 2D shapes or the splines or the shapes. Okay, I have to add a modifier, which is edit splines. In the geometry, we added a modifier which is edit poly. Now we have to add edit spline. So I'm going to add edit spline to this and edit spline to this. Now, the same thing as edit poly, I can just press on the arrow here. I can access the vertices of this circle or the rectangle. I can move them, rotate them, scale them. I can select the segments, which are between one point and another. It's called a segment. It's not an edge because it can be a curve. That's why it's a segment. Okay. Spline, it's the whole line, as if like the element. So that's the same in here. Selection, vertex, segments, spline. And I can use the shortcut, keyboard shortcut, 1, 2, and 3. So depend what you want to do. I can just deform this sphere or circle, make it like, say, something like more like an egg shape maybe. That's great. Okay, and that's done. Now the second option is soft selection. I already talked about soft selection in geometry. That's the same applicable in here, the same exact thing. But in 2D is not much used as much as the geometry. But if I go in here, use soft selection, and I can play around with the fall off to make this have more effect on the surroundings. So if I move this point, you can see the other points can move slightly, okay, because they're not very close to each other. If you want to use this, you can use soft selection or not. Now, the third part is very important. But before going in here, which is the adjustment and editing of the geometry of that, I want to edit the vertex and the option of the vertex, or how the vertex will look like. By default, the vertex has something called Bezier. These handles, okay, which are the tangent for this point. By default, it's Bezier, as you can see, in here or in here or in here or in here. And maybe this is what I want, or sometimes this is not what I want. I can change the behavior of this vertex from a Bezier to something else. So all I need to do is select the vertex or more than one vertex, right-click, and I have the axis in here. I have something called Bezier Corner or Bezier or Corner or Smooth. This is what I was working with Bezier. I'm going to work with Bezier Corner first. Bezier Corner is exactly the same as Bezier, but the only difference is that the right handle is different than the left handle or the other handle. Okay, so I can get something like a corner in here, maybe something like really sharp, or at the same time, I can have it some kind of different curves, something like that. That's why it's called Bezier Corner. So I can access it and make the left handle move differently than the right hand. While Bezier is different. If I move the left handle, the right will always move with it. If I scale it down, it will scale down. If I scale it up, it will scale up. So every time I move this handle, the other one will move so that this line, this handle, always is perpendicular to this vertex. So this is Bezier. If I want to change it to a corner, then this is a corner, but it doesn't have any handles. And the same thing goes for smooth. It will be smooth, but with no handles. So it depends what exactly you want. Sometimes corner and smooth, they come in handy and quick, but sometimes if I want more details, I will definitely have to go to Bezier or Bezier Corner. Perfect. So I'm just going to go back to maybe, let's say Bezier Corner. I like this, this shape. So I'm just going to move this like this, and I'm going to try to move something like that. I just made the move tool a bit smaller so I can just select this. I'm gonna go like this. Okay, great. This is my shape. I loved it, and I'm gonna work with it. Great. Now, if I go down to geometry now, I can edit this shape like I was editing in polygons. Now, if I go, the first option that I have, which is important, is attach. Attach, and usually I used to have detach next to it. In the splines, edit spline, the detach is not in here. It's just at the end of the option here, which is in here, detach, at the bottom of the tab. So detach. So if I want to attach, I just have to do the same thing I used to do. So attach, and I'm gonna click on this other shape, and now these two shapes are attached to each other. You have to make sure that both shapes are just shapes, 2D lines, not 3D. I cannot attach a line with a box or a cylinder, okay? They have to be the same kind. So I'm just attaching these two objects together. So now they are one object, so I can select those vertices together. So they are one. Now, if I want to detach, I have to select a part, for example, this part, the whole part, and I will go down to detach. If I press on detach, it will detach it from the origin, so it will cut it. Or if I want to have a copy of it, there's the option. I have this checkbox, so I will detach as a copy. So if I press detach now, it will ask me what's the name of this detached object you wanted. You can put the name and okay. And now you will see that I have now two lines over here, one which is detached and one which is not. Okay, the original one stayed here, and that's the copy. I detached it and made the copy of it. Okay, same thing as the polygon options. Great. That's one of the main things that you're gonna use, detach and attach. Now, if you go down, you see that I have a lot of things in here grayed out. In Edit Poly, we used to select Vertex, and then we have a new item or a new tab called Edit Edges or Edit Vertices. And I go to Edges, I have Edit Edges. If I go to Polygon, I have Edit Polygons. And each one of those has its own tools. In the splines, it's a bit different. If you select Vertex, some of the icons will be not grayed out, so you can select them, and some of them will be grayed out because you cannot select them with Vertex. If you go to Segments, other points you can select, and then the ones that you cannot are grayed out. If you go spline, the others will be also visible, and some of them will be grayed out. Depending on what you're selecting, it will make you access some of the options or not. So I'm going to start with the vertex. Now, if I have a vertex, for example, this vertex, and I'm just going to go do a small thing, which is break. So I'm going to break this vertex. What does that mean? So this vertex is broken into two vertices now. So I have one vertex in here, and now one vertex in here. Okay, so two vertices, it's broken. What if I want them to be attached to each other? So I have two options. Definitely I can select and snap it, go to snap tool, and then go to vertex, and then snap this point to this point. Definitely I can do that. But this won't solve the issue. They are attached, they are snapped, over each other, but they are not welded. So when I select this and I move it back, you can see they are not welded. They are not the same object. So if I want them back, not like before, broken, so I can just make them separate or not, all I need to do is select those two lines. Okay, I think by mistake I just made it go up. Okay, so just select those 2 points, and I'm going to go for the first option, which says weld. If I press weld, as you can see, nothing's happened. Nothing happened. So weld, nothing. So what's more important in welding is basically this number in here, which is called the threshold. Thresholds mean the strength or the distance needed for these 2 points to weld to each other, to become one, or maybe more than 2 points, maybe 3 points, or 3, 4, 5 vertices, doesn't matter. So I can select them all and press weld. So now 0.1 is too small for this valve. It has to be at least maybe 5 in my case, because the grid equal 10. So this is 10 centimeters. Okay, so the distance from here to here is almost half. Okay, so it has to be like 5, maybe 6. Okay, so if I go 5 centimeters in my case, and I press weld, you can see they jumped over each other and they got stuck into one vertex now, not two. So they got welded. Okay, this is very, very useful. One of the very important things that we're going to use in splines, which is welding. Sometimes, especially when we're importing stuff from AutoCAD or from Illustrator or any other software into 3D Max, which is vector-based, we will need welding for sure. The second thing that I care about, if I'm going to just select the segment in here, I'm going to delete it, it's connect. So if I want to connect these 2 points in here to vertices, I have to go to vertex and then connect. I'm going to select this vertex, click and drag, and go to here. So it will connect these 2 vertices together and it will weld them in here and here. This is very important. It will do the welding automatically. So now if I select the vertex in here, it's only one vertex. And if I select the vertex in here, it's one vertex. Okay, so that's basically concerning weld and connect. Now, if I go to this vertex in here, I can use something called Philiton Chamfer. Fillet is, let's say, I'm going to just do a fillet of 10 centimeters. Fillet, it will do this kind of curve of this vertex. Instead of having this vertex corner very sharp, I'm just doing a fillet. And I can do the same thing for chamfering, for 10 centimeters also, but chamfering, it will cut it in this kind of matter. We did the same in Edit Poly. It was in the Edges tab, Edit Edges, so we went for chamfer. We used to chamfer the geometry, and then we can add segments to become a fillet. So in here, there are 2 separate items. So either chamfer or fillet. Great. This is all we need to know about vertex. That's all what we're going to care about for now. Segments, there's not much to do in segments, but I have only one thing that I really care about, might be interesting. If I have, let's say, this segment in here, this is the segment, okay, and I decided I want to have more details in it. So I cannot move it around because it's a straight line. So what I need to do is add more vertices to it. So I can divide it. So select this edge, okay, this segment, and go to divide, and I want to divide it in how many vertices? In 1, 2, 3, let's say 2. So divide, and I got 2 more extra vertices. So now I can just go to vertex, select, and I can move, maybe move, and I can have different more details or whatever. Okay, that's concerning edge segments. If you go to spline, I have 2 options. One of them, which is outline, which is perfect for having a scale or let's say another line which is inside or outside of this. So I just make this, for example, this is called an outline. Okay, so I'm getting an outline of this original line. Perfect. And I can do the same thing for this, and I can do another outline, which is maybe inward also, something like that. Now I have 2 objects that have 2 outlines. Great. Now I'm going to select this outline. I'm just going to push it forward. Maybe it's like this. Okay. And now I'm just going to access also the spline. And I'm going to use my last tool, which is called trim. So now I can trim these 2 shapes from each other. So trim, I can trim this line, this line, this line. Now it depends where do you want to connect. So I'm going to trim this line maybe. And this is going to be connected in here, and this is going to be connected in here, so this is perfect. Same in here, I'm just going to leave this here, so I'm going to trim here and trim this. So I'm just going to open them like that. So this is 2 objects now, they are 1. Now the problem is, if you go to vertex, these vertices are not welded. So I have to weld them. As I said before, I can weld more than 1 vertex. So I'm going to select all these, and all these. Okay, so these 2 and these 2 and these 2 and these 2. This is not useful, so I'm just going to deselect it. So I have now 2, 4, 6, 8 vertices selected. Okay, so 8 vertices selected, I need to weld them. So I just have to go to the vertex in here and weld. If I keep the 5 centimeters weld, definitely these 4 vertices will be welded together and these 4 will be welded together. Okay, actually they were not, which is okay. Great. So now what I care about is this vertex is welded or not. It is true. What about this? It is true. And this, I can just have to check them out to make sure they are welded. That's it. So they are all welded, which is perfect. And that's the last thing we're gonna talk about in the edit spline. So spline, trim. Okay, we definitely talk about outline, we talked about the divide in the segments, and we talked about the weld and connect and Philiton Chamfer. Great. Now I have a 2D shape. This is a 2D shape. It's made out of 2 different shapes, which is a circle and a rectangle. And I've just played around with them and I came up with a shape, which is, I don't know, what is it? Okay, now if I want this shape to be 3D, all I need to do is select the shape and I can add a modifier which is called Extrude. It's not inside the edit splines as we done in edit poly, so it's in another modifier which is called Extrude. So I'm gonna go Extrude, and now I can push my extrusion up or down. That's the amount inside the parameters, and I can add segments if I want. In my case, I'm gonna add some segments. So this is what I want. So now I have this 3D object. Great. Now this 3D object can be like so, or just gonna shift and drag, copy it, okay, and I'm gonna delete the extrude, or I can hide it in my case. So I'm just gonna access the spline, and I'm gonna select the inner spline and just delete it. And I'm gonna do the same exact thing and go extrude, and now I got this kind of extrude. So if I don't have a thickness for that, everything will be extruded, the whole object will be extruded. If I want the thickness of it, so I get this kind of extrude. It doesn't matter, it depends what you want. Okay, but what's more important now, because it's a 3D object now, okay, I can add edit poly to it and work with the polygon again as exactly what I did before. For example, I can select this, I can go to maybe bevel, I need to scale it down, maybe something like this. Okay, and then I might extrude it down. So I'm just getting this kind of thing, and then maybe bevel it again. I don't think I can bevel anymore because it's very tight. So let's say this is what I want, and then I'm gonna select all these. So the whole ring in here, and then maybe extrude, maybe inward, but local normals. Okay, I'm getting this kind of shape, and then say yes. So I just adjusted this shape into something else. I added more details using edit poly. Same thing I can do in here. So I'm going to turn off edit poly, select this object. I can add edit poly over it. And everything I've learned in edit poly, I can just use it in here. So I can do the same thing that I've done before. So I'm going to do extrude. I'm going to do extrude by local normals. And I'm going to extrude maybe outward, not inward this time. Okay, so I'm going to get this kind of shape. Perfect. If this is what I want, that's perfect. I just added details, and I can do chamfer, I can do anything that I've learned in the edit poly. So this is perfect. These 2D shapes can be converted back to 3D and then use all the edit poly modifiers. So definitely sometimes using 2D lines is easier to start with and then convert it into 3D and then work with that. And sometimes it's better to start with 3D geometry and edit them and try to work around with them and model them to become your original model. Perfect. Just gonna select these and delete. I'm gonna go back to the shapes and I'm gonna go back to line. I never used line yet, so I'm just gonna go line. Line is the only one which is a bit different than the others. Okay. First of all, in the line, definitely there's a creation method. By default, the initial type is corner, and the drag type is Bezier, or you can make it smooth. I'm just gonna explain what are these, so you can change them if you want. So by default, initial type is corner. It means if I click and then click and then click, it's going to be straight lines. Corner. Drag type, it means if I click and drag, it will become a Bezier. Okay. Now I finish. I want to close it, so I click in here. It's asked me, do you want to close or not? If you say yes, it will weld these 2 points together. If you say no, it won't, and then it will continue. So now if I want to end up, I right click, and now this is done. Okay, what happened in here is that if I go to the line, I select the vertex, it has a Bezier. And as you can see, I just accessed the line and I went to vertex. I did not add an edit spline. That's why it's different. The line is the only shape which is editable. By default, the edit spline is within. Okay, so you can see I have my rendering, interpolation, selection, soft selection, and geometry at the same time in the same option. So which is okay, great. So that's it. I'm going to delete this. I'm just going to draw another line. So click. I can press shift to have it go horizontal and vertical if I wanted to have really straight lines. Okay, I'm just going to draw something like that and done. I want to close it? Yes, I want to close it. Okay, if I don't close it, it means it's not welded, and I'm going to do exactly the same kind of thing. Okay, and then if you want to close, I'm going to say no. I'm just going to right click. Now, the difference between closing and non-closing is basically when you extrude. If I go and extrude this, you can see it's extruded, as I've seen before. But if I'm going to select this, I'm going to extrude this, you can see it will be extruded as so. The lines will be extruded up without the thickness. Why? Because in here, it's not closed. There's some line over here, or vertex, which is not welded. If you want to fix that, you can just fix it. Just I want it like this, select both points, and then go to the rendering geometry, and weld. Okay, so now if you go extrude again, it is fixed. This is very useful, as I've said, because sometimes when you import, especially when you're importing from another software, such as Illustrator or AutoCAD or any other software that works with Max, which is a vector-based, sometimes when you import it, it might have some kind of errors, or maybe you miss them from the other softwares by mistake, and you try to elevate them to become a 3D. In here, you will get this kind of error that's the line is extruded without the thickness. So you have to make sure you have to check around and see which vertex needs to be welded to be fixed.